So, hello everyone. Happy afternoon. If you're on the East Coast like I am, I guess if you're on the West Coast, it's still morning. Welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome you and thank you for participating this afternoon. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. Today's webinar is on National Transit Database 2001 Safety and Security Non-Rail Mode Reporting. We are pleased to have as our presenters today Ann Singleton, who is an NTD Senior Safety Analyst and Safety Team Lead, James Overbeek, the NTD Validation Analyst, and Dylan Cullifer, the Junior Safety Analyst. Today's presentation will consist of the material with Q&A being answered not out loud, but in the Q&A box throughout. So you can utilize this feature at any time by calling up the Q&A box and typing your question in the chat. And I believe the person who's not actively speaking on the presentation will make every attempt to answer your question. At the end, if there are still questions coming in, we can spend a couple of minutes. I can moderate them so that there's not dead air. And questions in the chat box, we will also try to get to, but it's not the best way. So please take a look at your screen and try to locate the Q&A box. That's best. If you don't have a copy of the presentation, it was emailed to you in a link that went out with the link that let you access this webinar. I'm going to be pasting a copy in the chat box, so you'll have it there as well. I think that's it. If anyone needs any help at any time, feel free to chat me in the chat box. I will also put my email in there if you have any other questions or comments at any point. And I guess without any further ado, I will turn this over to Ann.
Thanks, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. The goal of today's session is to familiarize the NTD reporters with the safety and security reporting requirements and the individual reporting forms. As always, we hope that the knowledge you gain today will make your job easier, and we sincerely appreciate your commitment to safety and security reporting. For those of you that report for purchased transportation providers, known as PT in the system, please be sure to share this presentation with them as well so that they too are aware of what you are required to report to NTD. This presentation may also be helpful for those that provide data to you from other departments. So today we're going to show you how to access the NTD system and navigate through the menus and forms. We'll discuss how setup is achieved and review the safety package navigation features. Then we'll go through reporting on each of the 4 safety and security reporting forms that you see listed here and in a typical collision report as well. As mentioned, James, Dylan, and I are your instructors for today. Joe Eldridge, the NTD Operations Center Manager, and Thomas Coleman, the NTD Program Manager, will not be joining us today. So again, here's our contact information. We'll also show you this again at the end of today's session. You get your assigned safety analyst contact information is also displayed within the NTD system once you're logged in and you're in your account. It's located on several screens, as a matter of fact. If you don't know who your analyst is, if you're a new reporter, please feel free to contact any of us for assistance. So first, we'll have a brief overview of the NTD program, and then we'll discuss the website and show you navigation. In 1974, Congress established the National Transit Database Program as a means to collect information and statistics on transit safety systems in the United States. The first data was collected in 1979 via paper reports. Since then, the NTD has evolved into the nation's primary source of information and statistics on transit systems. The data reported to NTD is used in a variety of ways to include publicly available data products, which can be used for peer review, industry performance reports to Congress and other federal agencies or departments, and the formulation of national policy. The data is also used to direct, support, or improve other FTA programs and initiatives and is used to factor federal funding allocations. Agencies that are recipients or beneficiaries of urbanized area formula funds 5307 and 5311 are required to report data with some exceptions. Both public and private providers are encouraged to voluntarily report, as this will increase the federal grant allocation that the urbanized area receives. All reporters designated as full reporters are required to report monthly safety and security events meeting a threshold. Agencies designated as small systems or rural tribal agencies report safety and security data on an annual basis. Excuse me. How do we validate your data? So SNS 40 forms are read by the analyst to compare the event description against the data points in the report. In addition, all forms are periodically run through various system validation programs looking for common issues. If the analyst has questions or requests corrections, the analyst typically returns the form to the agency, but may also call or email the reporter. Once corrections are made, the analyst reviews the data again for accuracy and approves the form. The various forms and reports do have deadlines. The SNS 50 monthly summaries are due on the last day of each month for the previous month's data. For example, the March report is due by April 30th. The NTD system sends automated email reminders to the safety contact on the 20th of each month. So this is not a late notice, it's just a reminder to report. The NTD system sends automated late notices on the 1st and the 5th of each month if your data has not been submitted. Note that if a report has been saved but not submitted, it is considered late. If you get a late notice, please check to ensure that all of your reports or forms are submitted. If a form is still not submitted by the 15th of the month, a third late notice is sent by the analyst. If there are extenuating circumstances why you cannot report, please advise your safety analyst. The major event SNS 40 report is due no later than 30 days after the date of the event. Failure to report required NTD data can have severe consequences and could affect the agency's annual program funding. A failure to report can be submitted by an analyst to FTA for a variety of reasons that you see listed here. Please remember to submit reports and respond to analyst inquiries in a timely fashion. So this is a screenshot of the National Transit Database homepage on the Federal Transit Administration website. On the left are several links indicated by the red arrows you see that we're going to discuss on the coming slides. The first of the links is about the NTD. This option contains an overview of the NTD program, contact information, and help desk contact information. The NTD data option provides access to published data products, including the safety and security time series files, current annual data and profiles, monthly ridership statistics, the National Transit Summaries and Trends document, just to name a few. Under reference materials, you'll find the NTD glossary, policy manuals, quick reference guides, and information on training, conferences, and more. Click on either the NTD reporting tool or the reporting login tool selection to access the NTD reporting modules. Your business email address in all lowercase letters is your login. Users can change a password as often as they like, but the system requires a password change every 60 days. Passwords must be at least 12 to 20 characters and comprised of at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, and/or a special character, any 3 out of the 4. If a user has been inactive for 60 days, the system will lock the ID. If you're locked out, you may try and gain access by the reset password link. If you do gain access, but you do not see all of your normal selections, you can try an unlock request from the Actions menu, or of course you can contact the NTD Help Desk, your annual analyst, or your safety analyst for assistance. The agency's user manager establishes a person's user role in the system. The user manager is also the point of contact if you need to have your user role changed. A person must be uniquely identified in only one role. There are 6 access levels for NTD reporting. The CEO delegate, NTD contact, and editor have the highest levels of access and full functionality to include the NTD annual forms, monthly ridership, and safety and security data. CEOs and delegates can also submit the agency's certification forms as well. The safety contact has full function access to all safety and security forms. The safety contact will also receive reporting reminders and late notices. The safety editor cannot submit or delete forms. They can create and modify. Safety viewers can only view safety and security data. As mentioned, to log in, you click on the NTD reporting tool or the reporting system tool. The first screen that appears is shown here is on the left, and once you click on the agree to the disclaimer, the boxes for you to enter your username and password are presented, which you see here on the right. You may also see a forgot password or reset password link accordingly. With the launch of the new sites interface last September, the first screen to appear will be similar to this screenshot. However, you may see different options based on the sites you have access to. On this screen, you can bookmark NTD, if that's the place you go to most often, by clicking on the star. Then once you do that, it will skip over this screen from future logins, unless there is a system notice, which you will have to acknowledge. Once you complete the login, you will see the default home screen shown in this snapshot. You'll notice that there are menu options in the blue bar across the top, which we're going to discuss more as we go along. Beneath the FTA logo are the different modules that you can access. In this case, you'll see annual, monthly, safety, and profile. The tasks menu option shows you how many tasks are in your queue. Of course, tasks are things that you need to do. For example, one of the tasks you may have is to manage any pending or incomplete SNS reports you may have. The Reports tab will display reports that are available to you. First, click on the category, and in this case, you'd click on Safety when you click on that Reports tab. And there are 2 reports there that you might find quite helpful. One is the Historical Lookup Report to view safety and security data that you've reported in prior years. And another report is the Rate Compared to Industry Rate Report, which will compute and compare your agency's incident, injury, and fatality rates against the industry average per 10 million unlinked passenger trips. Under the Action menu option, there are no actions related to safety data reporting, but you may see some actions under there based on your user role. On the top portion of the screen, the grid provides internal access to other sites, such as FTA organizations, the user management module, the SSOR for the state safety oversight data, and so on. The silhouette, or headshot, if you will, is where you log out, and you can also access your Appian profile and system settings. There's one change in 2021. We have a new type of service called Transportation Network Company. It'll have a TN when you look at your types of service in the system. This is a special type of service involving non-dedicated transit vehicles. Types of service are designated within the annual reporting forms. For more information about this or any other types of services, you can contact the person in your agency that completes the annual reporting forms, or you can talk to the annual validation analyst. Okay, so first we're going to review safety and security setup and navigation. Safety and security packages automatically generate at the beginning of the new calendar year based on the agency's previous reporting status. Modes and types of service are available in the safety module are determined by the agency's P20 form. If you see any unexpected changes to the modes or types of services, or have any questions about modes or types of services you see, again, please contact the person in your agency who submits the annual report data. Again, if you don't know who that is, you can call us and we can look into it, and we may direct you to either the help desk or your safety analyst. Please do not attempt to modify the agency's P20 profile, as any changes that you make there can affect all aspects of NTD reporting and may cause data to be deleted. The safety packages give you access to all the safety and security reporting forms you see listed here. The SNS 20 CEO certification form, the SNS 30 security configuration, the SNS 40 major event reports, and the SNS 50 non-major summary report package forms, excuse me. As I mentioned, from the Home tab, you would click on the Safety module to view the available safety packages by year. Right now, we still have 3 years open, but 2019 is going to close pretty soon. When the years appear, you click on the folder symbol on the left-hand side for the year you want to open. You may also notice on the right-hand side there's a pencil symbol. This is going to be a shortcut, but right now its functionality isn't quite what we expect, so it's not going to really save you a lot of time. But that's coming in the future. So when you click on the folder we just mentioned, the Safety Summary View, also called the landing page, displays. The screen shows the reporting year, your agency ID number and name, your validation analyst's name and email address, and shows the safety and security reporting period. For below the word Safety Forms, you see on the left-hand side, there are 3 filter boxes that allow you to limit which forms you will see in the form table below. These filters allow you to view forms by form, to view specific forms by form name, by mode, or by form status. And you can use them in combination with each other as well. You can also use your browser's find function by doing a Control F. And this is sometimes helpful to enter a major event report number that you may be trying to find. However, you have to be on the right page in order for it to find that event number. In the form table, you can sort by any of the columns by clicking on the column heading. A double click on the column heading will do a reverse sort. Again, this is the Safety Summary View. You cannot open any forms from this screen. It's just a view. To access forms and interact, create, edit forms, you want to click in the upper right-hand corner on the NTD Safety Forms button. So when you click on that NTD Safety Forms button, the dashboard is displayed. It looks similar to the Safety Summary View, but here you can actually open existing forms and create major event forms by clicking on the File New SNS 40 button located on the left-hand side of the screen. To open an existing form, click on the blue form name link in the first column. This form table can also be sorted and filtered, just as we discussed on the Safety Summary View. So that includes accessing and navigating around the system. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the SNS 20 CEO certification form. The SNS 20 CEO certification form is the CEO's confirmation of the accuracy of the safety and security data reported for the calendar year. The form becomes available on January 15th in the previous year's safety package. The form automatically calculates data from all submitted data for the year. Unsubmitted data is not included. The form is due by the end of February of the following year. Only a person logged in as the CEO or CEO delegate can submit the form. Late notices are sent to the CEO. And I'm just going to throw in here, we get a lot of pushback about that from some of the safety reporters because the late notice went to the CEO. Well, the late notice goes to the CEO automatically out of the system because that's the person who's responsible for submitting it. When we start sending late notices, we being the analysts, then we include the safety contact so that they can be aware of the situation and can provide any assistance as needed. All right, so reporters should review their data to ensure that it matches the statistics in the SNS 20 form. Agencies should also use any available in-house reports to help verify their data. Again, one source of that historical data is the historical lookup report, which you may find helpful. If the statistics on the SNS 20 form do not match your findings, please check again to ensure that all the reports are submitted. You may add or delete SNS 40s or edit SNS 50 data and submit or resubmit the forms, and the SNS 20 will automatically recalculate when it opens, which is why it's a little bit slow to open. It's recalculating every time you open the form. Your CEO will check the confirmation boxes on the adjacent to each data line. Then the CEO can click on Submit. Once the form has been submitted, it cannot be resubmitted. No Submit button comes back up again. So this is a snapshot of the CEO certification form. Please notice that the CEO name and title shown on this screenshot is just from our test database, and the data doesn't reflect any actual data reported by an agency. Okay, so that takes care of the SNS 20. Let's take a look at the SNS 30 security configuration forms. The SNS 30 security configuration forms collect the number and type of security personnel employed or contracted by your agency. One form is generated for each mode and type of service. The form is completed once at the beginning of the calendar year, and you are not required to update this form during the year. All SNS 30s must be completed and submitted to enable reporting. You cannot create an SNS 40 or put data in any SNS 50s until all the SNS 30s are submitted. All SNS 30 forms should be completed by the end of February, even if you do not submit SNS 50 reports, which only applies to commuter rail and the Alaskan Railroad. This is a snapshot of the SNS 30 form. Notice you have a place to enter the primary number of security personnel and a place to enter the total number of security personnel, which is the primary personnel and the secondary personnel added together. Please do not leave either of these boxes empty. Below that, below the quantity boxes, you see a list of 7 personnel types with 2 columns to identify the type as primary or secondary. The primary security force is the one that routinely responds to events and or is assigned to patrol agency property. You may only choose one primary type. The secondary security force is personnel who occasionally responds to or occasionally patrols when the primary security force requires assistance. You may select multiple secondary forces. Please use a count of 0 when you select use of local police non-contracted, whether it's for the primary or the secondary. The number of personnel is reported in full-time equivalent hours. So 1 FTE equals 1 person working 40 hours a week or 2,080 hours a year. Prorate the number of personnel if the person works only part-time providing transit security, or they provide security for more than one mode. One SNS 30 is completed for each mode and type of service. Be careful not to double count personnel. The number in the total number of personnel box from each SNS 30 form should equal the total number of agency security personnel. For example, as you see here, for MB mode, the total number is 1.5. For the LR mode, it's 3.0, and for the DR mode, it's 0.5. So this means that the total security force the agency has would be 5 full-time equivalents. If your security force covers multiple modes, you may use any reasonable method for determining FTEs. That may be modal ridership or the number of employees covering a mode. If an agency contracts for security and pays a monthly fee based on services used, they should determine FTE based on the previous year's total hours worked. NTD allows for only one primary personnel type, as I mentioned earlier. If your agency has more than one type of security personnel it considers primary, report the security force with the largest number of personnel as the primary and the smaller force as secondary. For further information on the SNS 30, please see the SNS policy manual on the NTD website or ask your safety analyst for assistance. So that concludes the SNS 30. We're going to take a look at the SNS 50 monthly summary report. First of all, what's reportable on the SNS 50 forms? The definition of a reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on the transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a transit maintenance facility, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle. These non-major safety events must meet the single injury only threshold and are related to falls, electric shocks, maintenance worker injuries, and so forth. If the safety event results in multiple injuries, the event is bumped up to a major report. The SNS 50 form also collects the number of non-major fires where there is no evacuation, injury, fatality, or property damage threshold met, but the fire still required suppression. There are some exclusions to the non-major events, which are injuries at bus stops or shelters that are not owned transit property unless the person is boarding or alighting at the time, and OSHA events occurring in administrative buildings. If a person is transported solely for intoxication, it is not reported to NTD as an injury. On the form, enter the number of safety occurrences and the matching number of injured parties. Remember that injured means that the person is transported away from the scene for medical attention, whether or not they appear to be injured. Here are several examples of injuries reportable on the SNS 50. This is a snapshot of the monthly summary report form. You'll see that there are location boxes and injury types for the number of other safety occurrences now that is classified. And then down at the bottom, we have a section for non-major fires, which makes me think of something that we see sometimes. This number of non-major fires is not a summary of the information above. We sometimes run into that and they thought, oh, well, those were totals. They're not totals. Those are fires, and the above is safety events. Just wanted to point that out. All right, two of the location options that could be confusing on the SNS 50 form pertain to securement issues. In the one labeled Other In-Vehicle Securement Issue selection is used to collect an injury where a mobility device, such as a wheelchair or a scooter, is improperly secured and the device moved, causing the person to be injured. The other category is called Other In-Vehicle Not a Securement Issue. This is used to collect injuries such as slips and trips and falls that do not pertain to mobility devices, such as being thrown from a seat during a vehicle maneuver. Complete one form for each mode and type of service monthly. If no qualifying safety events occurred for the month in the mode, open the SNS 50 form and choose the checkbox adjacent to the No Data to Report checkbox, then save and submit the report. Do not include injuries due to collisions or security events on the SNS 50, even if the collision may be considered a minor collision. Just put it this way, injuries result of a collision are never reported on the SNS 50. There are times when we will question data, such as when the location selection is in vehicle and the injured person is not a patron or an employee, or if the location is reported as a non-revenue facility or the other location option and the injured person is a patron. The SNS 30 and SNS 50 forms can be modified at any time. Some reporters like to enter events as they occur during the month. For these reporters, they can modify the form and save and close the form after each change. You don't want to submit it before the end of the month. Your validation analyst reviews each report for accuracy, as mentioned. Again, if we have any questions, we may return the report to you, call you, or email you. If the return feature is used, the user login listed under last modified user column on the dashboard will be the one that receives the email. Okay, so now we're going to move into major event reporting, and so I'm going to let James take over from here.
Thank you, Anne. Let's take a look at major event reporting. For major event reporting, applicability is the same as for the...
James, we can't see your screen.
Oh, okay. Here you go.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. All right. For major event reporting, applicability is the same as for the SNS 50, but let's review this again. A reportable event is a safety or security event that occurs on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a maintenance facility or yard, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle, and meets a reporting threshold. There are some exclusions to the applicability, such as events that occur off transit property where people or objects come to rest on transit property after the event. OSHA events in administration buildings, death from illness or natural causes, other events such as assault or non-transit vehicle collisions occurring at bus stops or shelters that are not on transit-owned property unless it involves a person boarding or alighting at the time, or it involves a transit revenue vehicle. Also, non-revenue service, supervisor, or police vehicle collisions that occur while operating on public roads. Fatalities, which include suicides confirmed within 30 days. One or more persons immediately transported for medical attention. Property damage equal to or exceeding $25,000. Evacuations of a transit facility or vehicle for life safety reasons, a collision involving a transit roadway revenue vehicle, which results in either the transit roadway vehicle or a non-transit roadway vehicle being towed away from the scene, regardless of severity of damage. Here are a few examples of events that are reportable to NTD. 2 or more people, passengers, fall and are injured. A deadheading or out of service revenue vehicle is involved in a collision, and bus garage fires. In addition, maintenance related activities are included in reporting. Here you see a few examples of maintenance related activities that are reportable for your review. Less severe injuries to maintenance workers are captured on the SNS 50 monthly summary form. Here are a few types of events that are not reportable. All of these examples are not reportable because they occur off transit controlled property, such as on a city street. The exception to the last example is if the person was in the process of boarding or alighting at the time of the assault or robbery. You'll remember that part of the applicability criteria states involving a transit revenue vehicle. However, entity also collects non-transit vehicle collision incidents, such as an accident in transit parking lot that meets thresholds such as you see in the examples provided. Fatalities. A fatality is a death confirmed within 30 days of a transit-related event. This includes transit-related suicides. Please do not include deaths resulting from illness or natural causes, including found deceased on transit property, where it is not a result of a collision or suicide. The next threshold is injuries. An injured person is a person transported immediately away from the scene for medical attention. Transport may be by any means, including ambulance or by private vehicle. There are several exclusions listed that are not considered transported for medical attention and therefore not considered injured by NTD. Exclusions continued. Medical attention due to illnesses should not be reported. Also, as mentioned when we discussed SNS 50s, a person transported solely for intoxication are not reported to NTD as an injury. The property damage threshold. Events with total actual or estimated property damage equal to or exceeding $25,000 are reportable. Property damage includes transit vehicle and non-transit vehicle damage. Damage to transit stations, bus stop signs, and shelters if applicable. The cost of non-transit property, such as buildings and fences, etc., is included, and also the cost of clearing wreckage. Entity requires only general estimates, and you may use a variety of methods for estimating, such as you see here. Estimated damage excludes personal property such as laptops, cell phones, investigation costs, medical claims, or litigation. Property damage must always be reported on SNS 40, regardless of the amount, including zero damage. If the cost is confirmed as zero damage, please be sure to enter a confirming statement in the event description. Otherwise, the analyst will return the report requesting such a statement. If there is a collision involving a transit roadway revenue vehicle, which results in either the transit revenue vehicle or non-transit vehicle being towed, the event is automatically reportable regardless of any other threshold. This is limited to roadway vehicles and therefore excludes ferry boats and trains. For example, a transit bus and a car collide. There are no injuries or fatalities, and property damage is only $1,000. But the car is towed from the scene due to disabling damage. The event is automatically reportable. The towaway is not based on the severity of the damage. Evacuations. All evacuations for life safety reasons are reportable. Life safety means there's imminent danger to all people in the environment. This includes both directed or customer self-evacuations. Self-evacuations are where customers vacate the property without direction of the transit agency or other authority. Some examples of life safety reasons are suspicious package, bomb threats, a smoke event, fire, fuel, fumes, noxious odors, or a person with a weapon on a transit vehicle. If a bus has a transmission problem and passengers are evacuated to the sidewalk or shoulder, the transmission problem is not a potentially unsafe situation and therefore is not reportable. Evacuations are not common for collisions. There would need to be a fuel leak or similar life safety situation. As a reminder, to create an SNS 40 major event, from the dashboard, click on the File New SNS 40 button. Just a reminder that SNS 40 reports are due no later than 30 days after the date of the event. If you have an event to report that includes 2 or more transit modes from your agency, How do you choose which mode to report it under? If the event involved your rail mode and a non-rail mode, choose rail. For example, one of your light rail vehicles and one of your buses collide. Report the incident only once under the light rail mode. If the event is between two non-rail modes, use the predominant use rule, which is typically based on ridership. For example, if a bus and a paratransit vehicle collide, report the event under the bus mode since it has higher ridership. The first two screens will act as a wizard to help determine if the event meets the thresholds. Screen 1 captures the date of the event, the mode and type of service, and the event type. This is a snapshot of setup screen 1. Setup screen 1 event types. The first and most common is a collision, followed by fires, hazmat spills, acts of nature, and other safety events that meet a threshold. Each of these will be discussed in more detail later in the presentation. There are two categories of security events: system security events, such as arson, bomb threats, suspicious packages, etc., that affect the transit system, and personal security events, such as assault, robbery, homicide, that affect one or more persons. The second setup screen asks you a series of questions, some of which are based on the mode and or type of event you are reporting. This is to determine the reportability of the event and the subforms that need to be generated. This is only a list that we will cover each in more detail. First is the number of injuries and or fatalities. Then the total estimated property damage amount, and the evacuation threshold is requested. And if the event type is a collision, then you are also asked the towaway threshold question. You'll also be asked if transit revenue vehicles were involved, which determines if this is a transit or non-transit collision. This is a snapshot of setup screen 2 for non-rail mode collisions. As I mentioned, if you chose collision on screen 1, then screen 2 captures if there were transit revenue vehicles involved in the event. Select yes if transit vehicles, including purchased transportation vehicles, are included. You would select no when the collision involves a private vehicle on transit property or a transit non-revenue vehicle collision occurs on transit property. Examples will be provided on slide 55. Based on the selection you have made and questions you have answered, the system will respond accordingly. If the event is reportable as a major event, the basic information screen will appear. If the event is not reportable as a major event, the system will generate a message that the event is not reportable and ask if you want to continue. At this point, you can edit the selections on setup screen 2 in case you answered questions incorrectly, which may have made the event seem not reportable. If the event meets the criteria for a major event, the basic information screen will appear next. The basic information screen displays the date you already selected. When entering the time, be sure to use AM or PM designations, even if you use military or 24-hour clock format. The approximate or actual location of the event. The geographic location, latitude and longitude is required. You are permitted to enter numbers, a decimal point, and a negative symbol for the longitude. Please use a minimum of 4 decimal places. If you do not have the coordinates, you can use a variety of internet resources. One such site is latlong.net. This is a snapshot of latlong.net site if you choose to use it. As you can see, there's a box to enter the physical address or the station name or milepost, and the system will display the coordinates in the latitude and longitude boxes. The basic information screen also captures the event description. The description box can hold 2,000 characters. If you exceed the 2,000 character limit, a message will pop up that you exceeded the limit and you will not be able to continue to the next screen until you reduce the number of characters. The description should be concise but descriptive so the analyst can understand what occurred, how it occurred, and should include the number and type of injuries or fatalities, and if the vehicle was towed. Also, please refrain from using codes such as IV or vehicle as vehicle 1 or vehicle 2 to refer to a vehicle. The analyst has to be able to determine who hit whom and how, and not all reporters refer to IV or vehicle 1 as a transit vehicle. Event descriptions should not include any personally identifiable information such as names, addresses, badge or driver's license numbers, and so on. However, do continue to include ages and genders. This helps us validate your reports. The basic information screen now includes attempted suicide and suicide checkboxes when the event type is a collision. This is corroborated by the same checkbox on the injury or fatality form. The last piece of information is the name and phone number of someone to contact for additional information regarding the event. You do not need to enter the name of the person if it's the same as the person reporting the event. When you enter a phone number, enter only the numbers and no parentheses or dots. The field will self-format. The basic information screen is also the first screen that the progress bar appears on. This bar shows you how many subsections you have to complete and your progress thus far. This is a snapshot of the basic information screen. First, we will review the details of reporting a collision. The collision screens will vary slightly depending on the selections made on setup screen 2. Typically, there are 4 screens or subforms that may appear when reporting a transit collision. These are the collision event information screen, the collision information screen, the transit vehicle involved screen, and if applicable, the other vehicle involved screen will appear. This is a snapshot of the collision event screen for non-rail modes. The first collision screen is the collision event information screen. First, this form captures information about the number of transit vehicles involved. The answer would always be 1 unless 2 transit vehicles from your agency collide. The location of the event, such as a transit station, intersection, bus or service stop, non-revenue facility, which would be a transit bus barn, yard, or maintenance facility. A bus or service stop is appropriate location for modes such as demand response, paratransit, picking up at a person's home. Continuing on with locations, ramps, streets, highways are reported as roadway, not a grade crossing or intersection. Please do not select other and type in highway or freeway. Other is used for parking or private property. Grade crossings are locations where rail tracks and vehicular traffic intersect. Parking lot entrances, exits, and driveways are not reported as intersections. Use the roadway, not grade crossing or intersection selection. For the collision with selection, indicate what the transit vehicle collided with, such as another vehicle, person, fixed object, and so on. A collision with a bicyclist, pedicab, a person in a wheelchair, or on an electric scooter is reported as a collision with a person. Larger scooters, like small motorcycles, mopeds, and motorcycles, school buses, or dump trucks are all reported as a collision with a motor vehicle. Use the other selection only when no other selection is appropriate. In a multiple impact collision scenario, report the collision with as the first object impacted. The last selection is a number of other non-transit vehicles that were involved in the collision. This box is not the total number of vehicles in the collision. It is only the number of non-transit vehicles involved. So please do not include the transit vehicle in this number. Let's look at a few examples of how to determine how many other vehicles to report. If car 1 cuts off a bus, but no contact is made, and the bus goes on to hit car 2, the number of other vehicles to report is 1, because only car 2 had contact. Another example is if car 1 hits car 2, and car 2 hits the bus, the number of other vehicles to report is 2, since both car 1 and car 2 had contact. NTD also collects non-transit collisions such as an accident in transit parking lot or with transit property. The event must meet a reportable threshold. Here are a few examples you can read through. For number of other vehicles selection, enter the total number of non-revenue or private vehicles involved. The non-transit collision form will appear when you select the collision event type on setup screen 1 and select no to the question, were transit revenue vehicles involved in this collision on setup screen 2. After the collision event information screen, the next screen to appear is the collision information screen. This is a snapshot of the first part of the collision information screen. The collision information screen captures information about the conditions at the scene, such as the weather and lighting conditions at the time of the collision. The twilight selection is used to refer to both dawn and dusk when it's not full light or full dark out. Please be sure your lighting corroborates the AM/PM time you entered on the basic information screen. Also, indoors is not used to indicate street lights or lights at a station platform. Here are some considerations when reporting the roadway configuration. You would select limited access highway to report an incident on the freeway. A limited access highway has access limited in some way. For example, it may not allow pedestrians or bicycles. Please be sure that the location chosen on the collision event information screen is corroborated here on the collision information form. If you chose roadway intersection or grade crossing, the system will generate the categories for the intersection control and grade crossing control devices, if applicable. Based on your location, one of these categories will always be not applicable. The no control device selection is used only if there is no control device on any side of the intersection. If your report does not include the information, you can look it up on Google Maps. At this point, we have completed the collision information screen. The next screen to be presented collects information about the transit vehicle involved. One screen will appear for each transit vehicle involved. The form includes an identifier count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of vehicles. This is the transit vehicle involved screen. The form captures the information about the revenue vehicle. First is the vehicle fleet information, the vehicle action at the time of the collision, the collision type, which is the part of the transit vehicle that was impacted, the speed at the time of the collision, and a question asking if the vehicle was towed due to disabling damage. The fleet involved section integrates with your agency's most current A30 revenue vehicle inventory form. There are separate A30 forms for each mode and type of service. With this integration, you will choose a vehicle from the list of available options. When the selection is made, the vehicle manufacturer and fuel type is already part of the selection thus eliminating making an incorrect selection. Please check the A30 to ensure your vehicle is in the fleet. If you're operating a new manufacturer that is not in the A30, you'll have an option to enter the vehicle into the form. However, adding a vehicle to the collision form does not update the A30 form itself. If you have questions about an A30, please contact the person at your agency who completes the form. This is a screenshot after clicking the existing fleet button. This is the button used to retrieve the vehicle from the A30. The grid displays the available options from your A30 for the mode you are reporting, with columns representing pertinent data. Some agencies may have many selections, so you can use one of the 4 filter boxes to reduce the grid to show only certain ID numbers, certain vehicle types, or vehicle manufacturers. To select a vehicle from the fleet, click on the checkbox located to the left of the option. Then click on the Add Fleet button at the bottom of the subform. Once the selection is added, the total vehicles and active fleet vehicles column shown here will disappear and the agency fleet ID will appear, which would be more beneficial as part of the record and for reporters for vehicle identification. If the vehicle is not listed with the existing fleet, the user may add a new vehicle by clicking on the New Fleet button. The grid will display drop-down boxes to select a vehicle type, vehicle manufacturer, and vehicle fuel type. These are lists of all possible options unrestricted to the agency's A30. After making your selections, click on Add Fleet. Please do not use this selection if your vehicle is listed in the existing fleet list. This is a screenshot after clicking on the Add Fleet. If you need to make a correction, click on the red X under the Remove column heading and start over. Let's explore some of the transit vehicle actions options. When the transit vehicle is moving into or out of the scheduled service stop, report the action as either making a transit stop or leaving a transit stop accordingly, and report the transit vehicle speed to indicate the vehicle is moving. Do not choose this option if the vehicle was not moving. If you choose the stopped or parked option, be sure to report the vehicle speed as 0. The vehicle speed must be reported even if it is 0. This diagram shows most of the impact points which are reported from the point of view of the transit vehicle. Let's look at the options in more detail. Rear-ended means the rear of the vehicle was hit by the front end of another vehicle. Rear-ending means that a vehicle traveling forward hits the rear of another vehicle. Please do not report this action as head-on or other front impact. Please also remember rear-ended and rear-ending are always reported as a pair. Side impact means that the transit vehicle was impacted anywhere on its side, including the door, side mirror, or the tires, with the exception of when a side swipe occurs. Other front impact is used when the front of the transit vehicle is impacted, but not when it would be considered head-on or rear-ending. An example would be the front corner bumper hits another vehicle or object while turning, not the bumper on the side at the front. Likewise, other rear impact is used when the transit vehicle is impacted on the rear, but not when it would be considered rear-ended. An example would be if the transit vehicle was backing up and hit a utility pole. Sideswipe is used when two vehicles are parallel to each other, going in the same or opposite directions and bump and scrape along the sides of each other. Both vehicles would be reported as sideswipe. Sideswipe cannot be the action reporting a collision with a person. Instead, use side impact. When reporting a T-bone or broadside collision, one vehicle is reported as head-on and the other vehicle is reported as side impact. In the diagram, vehicle number 1, the other motor vehicle, would be reported as head-on, and the transit vehicle number 2 would be reported as side impact. Multiple vehicle accidents or chain reaction accidents can be a challenge to report. Remember to consider the first impact or collision type in your analysis. In this diagram, vehicle 1 would be reported as rear-ending. It's doing the hitting, which means that vehicle 2 was rear-ended, which then caused vehicle 2 to be pushed into vehicle 3, the transit vehicle, which would also be reported as rear-ended. For the speed, enter the actual speed of the transit vehicle at the time of the collision. If the speed is unknown, you could use the posted speed for that section of the road, and if needed, adjust that speed based on traffic and/or road conditions at the time of the incident. The last selection on this form is, was this vehicle towed from the scene due to disabling damage incurred as a result of the collision? Answer yes or no accordingly. If you indicated on the collision event screen that another vehicle was involved, the other vehicle information screen will appear. This screen gathers information about the non-transit vehicle involved in the collision. If more than one other vehicle is involved, you will need to complete one other vehicle involved information form for each motor vehicle involved. Vehicle counts are included on the form as well as options to add or remove vehicles. This is a screenshot of the other vehicle involved screen for non-rail collision reporting. The form collects the type of other vehicle, which includes a selection for non-revenue rail vehicle. The automobile option would be used for both cars and passenger vans, like a Dodge Caravan, for example. The action or physical movement of the other vehicle at the time of the collision is also collected. Just as when reporting the transit vehicle collision type, you are indicating the part of the vehicle that was hit from the point of view of the other vehicle. The form includes the question, was this vehicle towed from the scene due to disabling damage incurred as a result of the collision? Answer yes or no accordingly. Please do not select yes if the vehicle was towed because the operator was taken away or just wanted it towed. Tow must be due to disabling damage, even though that may only be a flat tire. This concludes the collision information screen. If your event includes an injury or fatality, you will need to complete a screen for each person. This form also includes a person count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of people. Person type location categories are divided into two groups: persons outside the vehicle and persons inside the vehicle. Transit vehicle rider is the correct choice for passengers boarding or alighting. Pedestrians walking along road also includes walking along rail tracks. The forms also include an attempted suicide and a trespasser checkbox on the injury form, suicide and trespasser checkbox on the fatality form. Please be sure to select the location and all checkboxes accordingly. Trespassers are people in unauthorized areas of the system. Just as with attempted suicide, if there are police reports, eyewitness statements, etc., to account for trespassing, please include the information in the event description. Using the word trespasser or trespassing is very helpful to the analyst. Trespassing events are not reported on the event level, and trespassing is not a threshold. Rather, we collect trespasser injuries or fatalities. This is a snapshot of the fatality form. Notice the operator can be either inside or outside vehicles. Please take care to ensure you are correctly reporting the location of the operator. This is a snapshot of the injury form. Just like the fatality form, the operator may be reported either inside or outside of a vehicle, so please choose carefully. We have concluded reporting collisions. Let's look at reporting evacuations, non-collision events, and editing SNS 40 forms. I'm now going to turn this over to Dylan.
Thanks, James. Now that we've concluded reporting collisions, let's take a look at reporting evacuations, non-collision events, and editing SNS 40 forms. Earlier, we discussed evacuations. Evacuations can be included in any event type, but are less common in collisions. If an evacuation is incorrectly included or excluded, you cannot add or delete it from a report. The existing report would need to be deleted and a new report entered with or without the evacuation. The evacuation subform includes a verification question to confirm the evacuation was for life safety or a potentially life safety condition. Please do not answer no to the evacuation question on this form. If the evacuation is not for life safety, then delete the report and create a new one by answering no to the evacuation question on setup screen 2. If the jaws of life are used to cut a person out of a vehicle, this would not be considered an evacuation. Here is a screenshot of the evacuation subform. In the evacuation details section, include a brief description of the evacuation, including the cause. The what was evacuated question is used to indicate what was actually evacuated. One choice would be vehicle/vessel, which would mean the bus. Do not report the location of the bus or ferry at the time. The last question asks if this was a self-evacuation. For example, this is when passengers get off of the transit vehicle without being told to depart. Reporting fires on the SNS 40 must meet one or more major event threshold. Without a major threshold, a fire requiring suppression is reported on the SNS 50 non-major summary report. To be defined as a fire, the incident must have had fire suppression equipment or personnel involved to contain the fire. Arson is reported on the system security event form, not as a fire. The presence of smoke with no fire and no suppression would be reported as an other safety event. Here is a screenshot of the fire event details screen. If the fire is in or on the vehicle, including in the engine, wheel area, or anywhere on the outside of the vehicle, the location would be reported as in or on vehicle. Next, report the type or cause of the fire. If the location is reported as in or on vehicle, you must select a vehicle fuel type. If the fire is not related to the vehicle, choose the not applicable selection. Acts of God events are natural and unavoidable catastrophes that affect the transit environment. Select all locations of property damage, injuries or fatalities, and evacuations. You will be able to choose more than one option. For example, the location should indicate the property or properties that were damaged and not the geographic location, such as the name of the city. Here is a screenshot of the Act of God screen. When reporting a hazardous material spill, the spill must meet a reportable threshold and have caused imminent danger to life, health, or environment, and required specialized cleanup. Here are a couple of examples of what is not reportable as a hazmat event. Oil, brake fluid, or etc. from a transit vehicle. There would not be enough fluid to meet a threshold. Or a bleach container carried onto a vehicle, breaks open, and the vehicle is evacuated due to fumes. This is reported as other safety event because no specialized cleanup was used. Here's a screenshot of the hazardous material spill screen. As you can see, you report the location of the spill and the type of material that was spilled. There are two categories of security incidents on screen 1, system security or personal security events. Each type must meet a major event threshold. System security events occur on transit property and affect the transit system as a whole. Personal security events happen to individuals on transit property or those boarding or alighting a transit vehicle. This is where you would report suicide or attempted suicides that did not involve impact with a transit vehicle. Here's a screenshot of the system security event screen. You may notice that there is an option called Other System Security Event on this form. This would be to capture security events that do not meet any other category. For example, shots fired or objects being thrown at a vehicle like rocks. This is a screenshot of the personal security event screen. You will notice that there is an Other Personal Security Event option on this form as well. The final major event type is Other Safety Events. This is your miscellaneous category. These events meet one or more of the following thresholds: a fatality, 2 or more injured persons, property damage of $25,000 or greater, or an evacuation. Please note you may report an other safety event with 1 injury if another threshold is included. Here are some examples that you can view. Please remember that other safety events resulting in only a single injury would be reported on the SNS 50 monthly summary form. Here is a screenshot of the Other Safety Events screen. At this point, we have completed all screens for major reportable event types. We'll review saving, submitting, and editing forms. At any point from the basic information screen on, the system automatically saves your report. So if you close the report without saving or submitting, from this point on, these auto-saved reports become pending reports, which are stored as a task on the task menu option. When you are ready to complete the report, click on the task menu option and you will see a listing of each task. Major event report task will appear with SNS 40 in the title. Just click on the task and the system will return you to the screen you were on when you close the report. Complete the report and then save and submit, or if you no longer need the report, you may choose to delete it instead. Save and submit options appear when you are in the view form mode. This screen allows you to review the entire report prior to submission. Once you click on the Save button, the report is saved and then given an event number at the top of the report. The report stays open so you may review it. When you submit a report, the report will close and return you to the dashboard. Submitting the report releases the report to the validation analysts for review and comments. It also notifies the analysts that a report has been created or edited. Analysts may return a report to you for questions or to make corrections. The system will send the last modified user 1 email for each report that is returned. As mentioned, the comment box is used by safety analysts to ask for clarifications or to request a change. It is located at the bottom of each form except the SNS 20 CEO certification form. Each time the form is returned, it is time-stamped. Users may respond to a request using the comment box. However, it is not necessary to tell us that you have made the change. If the analyst asks you to add a statement to the event description, please enter the statement in the event description and not in the comment box. When reviewing or editing your reports, it's important to learn how to move around the document. Here is a list of available navigation buttons, though each button may not be available on every form. One shortcut I would like to point out is the Jump to Section button. This button allows you to jump to a specific screen instead of using the next or back buttons. When you open the report, the first screen is the Setup Summary view. This screen is the only place where you can edit the date of the event, change the property damage, or include any injuries or fatalities if none were reported. Then you would click on Next, which displays your report in view form mode. At this point, you can continue to use the next button to navigate to each screen, or you can click on one of the jump to section buttons. The view form mode is also the only screen that includes the save and submit button. Please submit after editing a form. However, if you review a form but did not make any changes, please just click on close. If you delete a report without being requested by your analyst, please notify your SNS analyst. Not only do we need to record why a report was deleted, we also track the total number of reports each week. If the quantity goes down, we must figure out which agency deleted an event and contact them on the reason for the deletion. This concludes the presentation. If you did not have a chance to ask your question or would prefer to ask it in a one-on-one session, please feel free to contact your safety analyst. Their contact information is displayed here.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. Can you guys hear me? Somebody say yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I saw some questions in the chat box, and as I wasn't trying to be mean when I didn't say I wasn't going to answer them in the chat box, it's just that it was difficult to watch multiple screens and so on and so forth. So I just thought I'd address a couple more that I saw at the end. One person asked, Paula, it looks like, so if our bus is hit from behind, we report that. Well, yes or no. It depends on if the collision, doesn't matter. First of all, we don't take causal data, so it doesn't matter who hits whom. We're not interested in that information. We're interested if the collision meets a threshold. So, you know, I'm not going to go over the thresholds again. They're in the presentation. But if it meets any one of the reportable thresholds, then you report it, yes. I also see someone asked, just to understand, if we have 4 people on the bus plus the driver, which makes 5, and we're in an accident with another person in the car and there was a fatality, we have to fill out 6 different forms. The answer, yes, that's right. Question about bus fire. If the operator used suppression system for smoke or fire on a bus, would this be considered a fired event? Question mark. No one used a fire extinguisher or water to suppress the fire. Okay, it doesn't matter how the fire is suppressed. You can stamp on it with your foot. You can use the suppression system on the bus. You know, hit the button. Usually they fire automatically. So any suppression makes it considered a fire. Would it be considered an evacuation of a bus evacuated? Oh, I think I just answered that question. Well, at any rate, if there was a spill of bleach on the vehicle and subsequent fumes. Yes, because the bleach fumes could be a life safety situation, and obviously the operator evacuated the bus out of, you know, this caustic material. Bleach is chlorine, and chlorine is hazardous to your health. So yes. Okay, so I see in the queue. Whoops, looks like I already got answered.
Oh, I thought you just answered that because it was about the bleach. I'm sorry.
Oh. I thought I saw something about an attempted suicide. Let me go back. Let me go back down.
Sorry, it's unanswered. It says no. Wait.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Too fast on the button there.
Okay, so I see it says suicide ideation. I don't know what that is. And mental health with transport still reportable as a non-major. Okay. Right now, if a person says, okay, first of all, if they attempt suicide, okay, they attempt suicide in some way, there's an actual attempt. They were standing in front of the train or jumped in front of a bus and, you know, something, whatever, and they're injured and they're transported, it's reportable as an attempted suicide. And this says suicide, mental health with transport. Well, I'm assuming you mean attempted suicide, because if it was a suicide and it was successful, they'd be dead. If they were just, I'm not trying to be glib there, it's just, it would be, it's a different situation. But at any rate, if somebody's being transported, I think the question is just for mental health. They went to somebody, they say, I want to kill myself, and we, believe it or not, we do get this a lot, and they're transported. Right now, we're collecting those on the SNS 50 form. However, very soon, very soon. This is going to be changed to not reportable. So I'll leave it at that. I would say check back with us if it's happened. If it's already happened, then it would be reportable for right now. We'll send out, there's this and a couple of other things that are in the works right now. We just don't have final decisions made. And once those final decisions are made, anything that's applicable, we will send out to you either in a blast email in the system, or we'll actually just email everybody and let them know what these new criteria for 2021 are.
There's a new question about self-transports. Did you see that one, Anne? It says self-transports are reportable as long as it's not by foot.
Right, because that's not being transported. That's not considered transport by any means. So it can be a supervisor's vehicle. It can be the police takes them. Their mother comes and picks them up, whatever. And actually, we even had a question about somebody. The hospital is like right across the street, and they brought a gurney over and took the guy over to the hospital. So that's being transported by any means, but by foot is not considered transport.
Okay. Now I'm saying done. We've answered this one.
Did we get in the chat box or the Q&A?
Yeah, the one in the chat box about the accident type category. Did we?
Okay, is there an accident type category list that we could use to classify vehicle collisions? No. There's not. Sometimes because of the nature of the accident, we struggle with well, if there's a collision, I'll just say this kind of simply. If there's a collision and it meets a threshold, it's a reportable event as a collision. Now, if the collision is secondary to something else, somebody else asked me about an evacuation. There was an evacuation. I guess they pulled over to the side of the road. It wasn't super detailed, but perhaps they pulled over to the side of the road and then there was a collision after that. Okay, well, we always go by whatever happened first. So in that scenario, they would report the evacuation and include the details about the collision within the event. But we don't have any collision categories. They're all, and let me clarify one other thing. I'm not going to use the word accident in replace of collision. They're not the same things. You might call them that. I understand that. But we don't have any category called accident. They're the event types we have were listed back in the SNS 40 section. Basically, collisions, fires, derailments, acts of God, hazmat, and system security, personal security, and other safety events.
Okay. And there was a follow-up to the hospital question in the Q&A box. It says, what if the bus is going past the hospital and they ride the bus?
Well, but that's not transport from the scene, because they left the scene to get to the hospital later on, I'm assuming. You know, like they have an accident at a bus stop, the person's injured, they say, hey, you're going right by the hospital, just drop me off over there. But that's not being transported from the scene. That's being transported later on.
Okay.
Is that all of them?
I think that's all for now.
Okay. Well, if you still have any questions, you have our contact information here. Please feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'll be happy to help you with anything you have a question about. Any of the forms, any safety and security.
Oh, okay. There's a question for me. I'll just type the answer to that.
I do see a question from Carl. Minor vandalism less than $200 reported on the SNS 40. No, it doesn't meet a threshold. Unless somebody was injured during the when they were doing the vandalism.
Someone was asking for a copy of the presentation. I did paste that in the chat box earlier. Maybe it was before you logged in, so I can grab that link and put that in there again. This is for LR08. Sounds like I'm talking to a robot, but I'll assume you are a person.
And if you need it afterwards, I mean, I can send them out. I mean, I don't want to send out 1,000 presentations, but
no. I just sent out the link.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay. If you didn't get it, we can download.
Here, I'm putting it. It's putting it in the chat box again. two options
Okay.
in case one doesn't work.
All right.
Okay, that's good. Did we answer is immediate transport within a certain time frame? I guess that's referring to the hospital question again. Hot topic.
Immediate transport. Okay, I don't see it. Immediate transport. Immediate basically means it. When we say immediately, obviously, when there's a collision, especially if it's a significant collision, the police come, the EMTs come, you know, so on and so forth. But that's what we mean. It's basically from the scene of the event. You know, not like we've had situations where they've had a collision, a person walks away, you know, the investigation, the whatever is still going on, and the person comes back 20 minutes later and says, "Oh, I'm injured now, I want to be transported." No, it's got to be from the scene. Now I'm talking about non-rail thresholds, because this is the non-rail training. On Thursday, we have rail mode webinar session, and the thresholds for rail mode are different. So if you report for both, you want to come into both sessions. So if you haven't yet registered for the rail mode and you report for rail mode, you'll definitely want to log into that. Like I said, thresholds are completely different. Well, not completely, but there's a lot of different thresholds.
Okay. In the Q&A box, is there a link to the recording of the presentation for the discussion that was given? I'm not sure what you're asking, James. This recording, or did we reference a recording? Is that what you're talking about? Chris R says disabling damage is not like federal drug limits, which are strict.
I'm sorry, are you talking to me? I don't see this question. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's in the Q&A box. Okay,
Oh,
James,
okay.
this is being recorded and will be on NTI's YouTube page as soon as I can do a light edit and get it posted. So probably by next week. In the Q&A box, it says something about disabling damage is not like federal drug limits, which are strict.
Oh, disabling damage?
Yeah.
No, and transport for the operator being transported for drug testing, that's just policy, and that's not an injury. But with reference to your question, the reporting thresholds have to be the NTD reporting thresholds. So those are the guidelines. What we've stated in this presentation is the guidelines. It includes what's included in that damage and what's excluded in the damage, such as personal property, laptops, things like that. Also litigation, that's not included. Medical costs are not included. It's the amount of money to repair or replace whatever was damaged in that event. So if it's a collision between two cars, the bus, and a building, you're going to report the damage to the two cars, the bus, and the building. Hopefully that answers your question. If it does not, I know we're running over here. Again, please feel free to contact any of the three of us, and I'll be more than happy to go over as many questions as you have.
Yes, everyone's email address is in there. I guess if you have any further questions, reach out to Anne, James, or Dylan. I want to thank everyone for participating this afternoon. It was a lot of questions, big group. It was great. Thanks again to Anne, James, and Dylan. Always super informative, always super helpful. I know everybody out there who's filling out these forms really appreciates these webinars. You can show your appreciation by filling out a survey evaluation that you will receive a link in your email probably tomorrow. So please take that and let us know how you felt about the presentation, and this helps us shape further presentations. I guess that's it. Thanks for your feedback. Thanks for participating, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.